Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. If you haven't attended one of these before, I normally do them every Friday at 2:30 my time, just as the US market is opening officially. It's been an interesting week, not so much in stock markets perhaps, but we'll have a look at this stuff in a bit more detail. The dollar index is up yesterday, new highs for the year for the dollar index, so that's put pressure on the likes of gold. So that slid about $250 off its all-time high. So it's not quite 10%, is it? Perhaps 9% off the all-time high. So there's some interesting stuff to look at. So what we do in this every week, it normally runs for half an hour, 45 minutes. Have a quick look at the major announcements coming out next week. What's the major news that could drive markets next week? There's not a lot next week. And then we'll jump in, have a look at the markets, have a look at indices, FX, gold, silver, oil, have a look at Bitcoin, anything else that looks interesting. And then if there's any markets you want looking at, we'll have a look at those. That's it. Let's get started. Let's get some of the old housekeeping done. A quick risk warning. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It doesn't contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. There we go. It was a bit of a quiet week for me. I came into this week long the Nasdaq. I mentioned it, I think, last time round, didn't I? Last week. So I bought it. I bought it at 20,000 ahead of the election and came out of it this week. I did buy back in again. Got stopped out yesterday, so I've done 2 trades this week. One was a big winner, one was just stopped for the usual amount. So just hold on a second. I think someone, hang on a second, is just trying to get hold of me. Hold on a sec. Hang on. Bear with me. It always happens when you've got something else to do. There we go. Hang on. Am I imagining that? No. Okay, so I've got no trades on. I was thinking about going to go short this afternoon. Thinking about going short this afternoon if the market rallies. I can see it's falling away already again, so maybe I won't get the opportunity to go short. You know, it's been a bit of a boring week for stock markets, US stock markets, until yesterday when it started selling off. But otherwise, it was all a bit sideways all week. Anyway, let's take a look at what's going on next week. A quick plug for a webinar I did a couple of weeks ago. I run a WhatsApp group. I ran a webinar for everyone in the WhatsApp group. I'll do another one in the next couple of weeks if you are in the WhatsApp group on my day trading approach. So day trading setups for US indices, where to place stops, when to take profits, the low risk, high reward, false break approach that I use, and when not to trade, and what's right for you, position trading or day trading. I think for most people perhaps try really short-term trading when they first start trading, but there's no reason why you can't do it more medium to longer term. You don't have to be in and out during the day. You can have a more considered longer term position when it comes to trading. So I talk all about that in the WhatsApp group webinar that I did. I'll do another one in 2 weeks. I'll give you details later on how you can access all those. Right, let's go. What's happening next week? It's pretty quiet next week. There's UK inflation out on Wednesday of next week. We had that UK GDP, economic data out this morning. Not much growth in the last 3 months, with people saying it's the budget. Obviously, we're waiting for Labour's first budget, so very little growth in the UK. Inflation will be interesting next week, and what that all means for interest rates and everything else. I thought, nothing really moved on that UK data. We'll have a look at it in a bit more detail. But the pound, what did the pound do this morning when the data came out? Not much. It sort of slid a bit. It slid a bit since then. I think UK gilts are interesting. Perhaps we'll have a look at these in a bit more detail, because they're sort of bumbling around a 2-year low, UK gilts. But there wasn't much reaction to that UK GDP data this morning. So we've got inflation data next week. So let's see if that's any different. Then on Thursday, we've got US PMI, Producer Managers Index, isn't it? PMI? Or is it Purchasing Managers Index? I'm getting confused with the PPI. Whatever. That's on Thursday. And that's pretty much it for next week. There's a few speeches from the head of the European Central Bank, and also there's a few Federal Reserve people speeches. So perhaps there'll be some stuff that gets said there. Perhaps more of Mr. Trump's planned appointments might cause a few ruffles in markets. I don't know. But let's see. Let's see what happens next week. Otherwise, we'll jump in. We'll jump in and get started. So let's start off as usual, US stock markets. So it's been a really, if I look at this is the S&P. So this was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, really dull. And it's only yesterday that things woke up and the market started selling off. So for those of you who've watched these things before, it won't come as a surprise to hear that I am a buyer of the dip. We have got this trend. I mean, it goes back, obviously, COVID lows in the S&P. We sold off in 2022, partially because of the war in Ukraine and inflation. And then since October, this has been the trend since October. The trend is up, and it was only, I think, was it Monday of this week, the market made fresh all-time highs? Yeah, so Monday of this week, the market made fresh all-time highs. So I would buy the dip. So I think it's an interesting market going into next week. So medium term, like over days, I would buy the dip. Short term, if I had to do a trade today, I'd sell the rally. So if we did get a rally this afternoon, I'd sell it. But going into next week, I think it's going to be interesting. We had these markets. This is the hourly now on the S&P. Had an absolute rocket put underneath them because of the election, obviously the presidential election that we had. Was it only last week? It feels like a lot longer than that. Anyway, the election that we had last week, market started moving on Tuesday. Didn't really look back until ahead of the open on Monday of this week. A massive rise. Was it a 5.5%? Something like that rise in the end for the S&P. NASDAQ went slightly more than that, and it started rolling over yesterday. So I think what's going to be interesting, first of all, next week, where does this stop, assuming it does stop? So I might be looking at the lows from whenever that is, the day after the election, where it paused on the way up. Let's see what happens. 58.75, 5900. Let's see. But, overall, the trend for US stocks is up. If you look at the last two presidential elections, the market has been strong, I think, into year end after that. If you look at the performance of the S&P under Trump and Biden, there is no difference. So I don't think markets care too much about the US president. So, but interesting to see where this all stops next week. I would like to go short today, but if it carries on falling off a cliff, I'm not going to get a chance to, and that's life. NASDAQ, so the NASDAQ again, new highs earlier in the week, Monday, and a big sell-off late on yesterday in the second half of the session, and a bigger sell-off today. So again, the trade for me today is to sell a rally. The interesting thing for next week is where does the weakness stop, assuming it does. So the NASDAQ started the run around about 20,000 ahead of the election, ran up to 21 and a bit. So 1,000 point, 1,200 point move. Where does the sell-off stop? Let's see. That for me is the interesting thing for next week. And like I say, I'd sell a rally today. Yeah, I mean, if we picked up on that trend thing that's been going since the August lows, it looks something like that, I suppose. So 20,400 is what the trend line followers might be looking at. You know, maybe it goes all the way back to 20,000. Who knows? Let's see. But I think that'll make for an interesting week next week anyway. And it really is getting clobbered today. So let's see what that looks like. These US markets look like next week. So that's that. If we have a look at some other markets, I'm not a fan of the FTSE because it is, you know, there's the FTSE 100. So the UK's FTSE over the last 6 months, and it's done nothing. You know, it's just a big sideways market. So I don't tend to trade the FTSE very often, if at all. But I thought it was interesting over the last couple of days, if we take our FTSE trend all the way back to the COVID lows, bang, 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 and we've got these lows from the summer around 7,900. So if you wanted to be a buyer of the FTSE, in the last couple of days, it has dribbled down to the 8,000 mark, and we've got a bounce. So if you thought, well, actually, the FTSE's at the bottom of the range, it's an interesting place to be a buyer. Looking for a swing over the next few weeks, few months, maybe, to see if it can swing all its way back up to 8,400. So let's see what happens with all of that. But yeah, I'm not normally a fan of the FTSE. European markets, interestingly, you know, with the US markets under pressure yesterday, we got a bit of a bounce for European markets. European markets have been decidedly not over the moon about the Trump win. I think, you know, I would guess it's because, you know, we had a bit of a bump early on. This is the DAX, so that was the move on Tuesday in the DAX last Tuesday, and then Wednesday it sells off and it's all a bit sideways, not really sure since then. And of course I wonder, you know, if the new Trump regime is going to introduce tariffs and all that sort of stuff, you know, how hard is it going to be for the big European businesses to continue, you know, how's it going to affect their profits of business they do in the States? Let's see what happens. So a bit sideways in European stocks, really. Not a lot I can see there. You know, that on balance, the DAX, the German DAX, is still positive. You know, we had all-time highs just over a month ago for the DAX. So I'd still be a buyer of the dip. It's just all been a bit scrappy, I think, over recent weeks. The Italian index is the same, you know, so not a lot going on with those. Japanese index, it's had that big bounce back after that massive sell-off in July. But again, you know, it's trading now where it was at the end of July. So we've had a lot of volatility, but not exactly a lot of direction in the last 3.5 months, you know, so not too much for me there. The Hong Kong index I thought was interesting. Let me just tidy all this nonsense up a bit. Just from a longer term perspective, you know, we'd had this big downtrend in the Hong Kong Hang Seng. It broke out of it, wherever it was, in May of this year. Sells off, starts building recovery. Then we had these big moves in the China A50 and the Hong Kong Hang Seng. I think because of Chinese government intervention. Went up like a rocket in September, you know, 17,000 to wherever, 23. You know, it's a big old move. It's a 30% move, and it's slid back. You know, I would like to be a buyer longer term, I think, of the Hang Seng. So I think that's an interesting market just to watch now and again during the week. Let's see what happens there. But so stock markets, for me, there is nothing jumping out. You know, it was a good week. Getting that ride up after the election. I'd like to be short today. If it continues to fall like this, I won't be doing anything. But then it's interesting next week. Where does this weakness end, assuming it does end? So I think we could be in for an interesting week next week in stock markets. So that's stock markets. Let's talk about the US dollar. The dollar index. I'm sort of kicking myself a bit because I've missed this trade in the dollar index because we had a sharp move again. This was the move on Wednesday, on election day last week. surged up, and then it just backed all the way back. And I thought, oh, that's just going to chop around for a bit now. And I took my eye off the ball a bit. And then it has gone a lot higher again. You know, the high on last Wednesday, was 105.40, and it's been above 107 since then. So we've had a good move in the dollar index. I think it's interesting up here. You know, it has been broadly sideways for the last 12, 15 months. So this is the US dollar against a basket of different currencies. I think it's 9 different currencies. I can never remember. So it's an interesting barometer for how the dollar's doing. I think this is an interesting market to watch to the end of the year, because we are back up. We're back up to the highs from October 23. And this ended up being a major barrier. Yeah, and the market just sold off, you know, dropped 600 points from there and just chopped around. So I think that's an interesting one. You know, let's call it 107.50, if we saw the dollar index through 107.50 next week, does it look like it's the start of a major breakout and a big new trend? Who knows? But if you thought, actually, the US dollar move is overdone, then this is a place to go short, because this is where it ran out of steam last year. So I think it's interesting up here, the US dollar. I think I would still be trying to buy it. I think it might have another go at trying to break that. Let's see what happens. So that might be an interesting market to watch this afternoon. So that's the US dollar. Let's look at some of the currency pairs. So look at pound against the dollar. This is interesting. I thought, I was expecting the bounce. We're not getting it yet, and it's still weak. So we've got conflicting trends for pound against the US dollar. You know, we've got the trend for the last 18 months since March 23 is up, bang, bang, bang. But, you know, the market has dropped in the last 6 weeks about 800 points. So I think that is interesting going into next week, pound against the US dollar, because here we are with 126. 126 was a big level on the way up in the summer. You could argue it's the trend line support as well. And we've got UK inflation next week. So it could be an interesting market to watch, that one. So let's see. Let's see what happens. But if it's going to bounce from anywhere, here we are. But of course, it's all contingent on what the dollar does. If the dollar index breaks out through those old highs, the pound is going to go through these old lows. You know, so interesting to see what happens next week with pound against the US dollar. The euro against the US dollar has fared much worse. So the euro yesterday hit new lows for the year. So we actually traded to its worst levels since October 23. So what's that? 13-month low. But again, is interesting because this was a major base, you know. So it sort of place your bets, ladies and gentlemen, isn't it? If euro is going to rally from anywhere, then here we are. Okay, so really interesting to see what happens down here at 104.50, whatever it is, next week. But of course, if we flip that round, we have our dollar index chart at those levels up there. So I think some interesting things going on in currency markets. But for now, the dollar is still strong. The euro and the pound are still weak. What does euro sterling look like? So the euro has been weaker. So euro sterling this week. So this is euro against the pound, hit its lowest since April 22. So it's that 2-year low. We can all go and do our Christmas shopping in Paris from the UK and save a fortune. So anyway, let's see what happens. But I think those are some interesting markets next week to watch. So that's that. Let's take a look at gold, because of course the gold gets impacted by the dollar. I think this is, from a more medium-term point of view, this is probably the most interesting market at the moment for me, because it's all gearing up to say buy, okay? But let's see. Let's just hold on a second. We've got, you know, the trend for gold has been up. You know, gold's had a great year against the dollar. It started at 2,060. It's currently $500 up for that. So it's still up 20 odd percent, 22, 23% for the year to date, even though it's slid a lot in the last month. The trend is still up. It made all-time highs in October, which is a positive. That's good. It's sold off. It's had a little look through the trend line. We're above the old lows, which were quite important on the way up, 25.45, let's call it. For fans of the RSI, it's the first time the RSI has gone oversold since September 23. So first time in 14 months, 13 months, the RSI has gone oversold. So interesting market. So for me, it was still weak until yesterday. So I'd still be a bit patient. But if I was a buyer now, if I was a buyer on Monday, then it's just where does my stop go? And I'd probably go the other side of at least, whatever that is, 24.70. Or you could go, I don't know, an aggressive stop would be underneath yesterday's low, but that's too aggressive for me. But I think that's interesting. So obviously all ties in with the US dollar, doesn't it? If the dollar suddenly has another rocket underneath it next week, we're going to see that price of gold fall again. So interesting to see what happens in the old currency markets next week. So that's those. Take a look at oil. Oil's interesting as well. It's all a bit sideways, but again, if you thought I really want to buy oil, arguably this is the place to buy it. For a medium-term trade, the 18-month lows for oil are down around about $64 a barrel. You can see, how important this area, this whole zone, has been over for more than a year now. So, what's that question? Tell us something about traders' bonuses at the end of November, as I know they're closing a lot of profitable positions and getting bonuses, but they're pulling the market down. Ignore that. They're not pulling the market down. I think that would just be a popular conspiracy theory. Don't worry about that. That doesn't affect us and doesn't really affect markets. I mean, you do have a bit of year-end window dressing that can go on in stock markets, but don't ever think that sort of stuff. The traders' bonuses is not pulling the market down. So don't worry about it. But thanks for the question. So back to oil. So we've got these old levels, 64 to 67. And this is where we've seen it bounce from in the past. So what's going to happen? It has stabilised over the last couple of weeks or so. There's a real lack of momentum in this market. It's not like we've seen a really sharp bounce off it. But interesting, I thought, down at these levels, to see what happens. So are we going to see? Are we going to see it build a base and rally? If we go back to whenever it was, June 23, we did see a rally up to 95. It's all been a bit drifty this year, particularly the last 6 or 7 months, so yeah. Been a bit drifty, bit boring, oil at the moment. Let's see what happens. Natural gas, crazy market, natural gas. Another crazy week for natural gas, really. I haven't traded this for a while. It's all, if you look at it in that time horizon this year, it's all a bit sideways, isn't it? It is all a bit sideways. And it's all a bit scrappy for me. There was a gap open on Sunday night. So Sunday night, the market gapped open from Friday night's close, pushed higher into Wednesday and sold off, and we're back to where we were on Monday. I don't even know with natural gas. What would you do? If I had to buy it now, I might put a stop under, I don't know, 240 or 230, but I've not traded it for a while. It's all a bit scrappy, choppy, call it what you will. I'd much rather trade markets where we have had clear trends, like stock markets, for example. So there's not a lot of interest for me in natural gas at the moment. Silver. So, silver's always an odd one, pushed out to multi-year highs, gold made all-time highs. Silver pushed out to 10-year highs. What would you do on silver? Again, it's been under pressure because of a rising dollar. What would you do? What would we do? Again, buy the dip. It's a bit like gold, isn't it? If we believe the trend is still up, then we buy the dip. Then we would buy the dip. Okay. So for me, I'd rather buy the dip in gold because I think it's a bit of a smoother market. If I was buying the dip in silver, I would probably want to stop below those early September lows. So another interesting one because of the US dollar to see what happens next week on that one. So we've done that. What haven't we done? Bitcoin, the crazy world of Bitcoin. What do you think? What do you think about Bitcoin? I mean, I have been saying, of course, the trend has been up. It's been really boring year, but of course, another one that has absolutely rocketed up 30% at its best since the US election. So let's see what happens. But if you bought it now, or if I bought it now, where would your stop go? I can't help thinking this is going to have at least a push through 100,000 just for the sake of going through 100,000. It might collapse to 50 afterwards, but I can't help feeling that we will get 100,000 on Bitcoin. But if you bought now, where would your stop go? I don't know. I would probably want to go the other side of 84 or something and see what happens. I'd much rather buy a deeper pullback on Bitcoin. It's all well and good that we have the market going up like a rocket, but we know, particularly in the cryptocurrencies, when they start to come off, they can come off really hard as well. So I think a sell-off would be interesting, just to see where the buyers were, or if everybody panics and fills their pants on the way down and bails out. I don't know, but you can't deny the strength. We had all-time highs on Wednesday. It's drifted a bit since then, but we're still above this 85 level. So if I had to do anything, I'd be a buyer. Yeah, and I can't help feeling, like I say, we'll see maybe 100k just for the sake of breaking it and see what happens next. Let's see. But I don't have, I don't trade Bitcoin. I got, so I've got no skin in the game on Bitcoin. But of course, it's always an interesting market to watch. And we're done with there, so I'm going to jump into your questions now. So for a change, the really interesting markets next week, I think, are the currency markets because of this dollar strength, because it's at new highs for the year, and because of the impact that has on everything else, such as particularly next week gold. So I think those are the interesting markets next week to see what happens. I mean, I always watch the stock markets anyway. I'm not going to get a selling opportunity by the looks of it today, but interesting next week to see where it all stops, assuming it does stop, of course, going into next week. So if you have any things you want looking at, put it in the chat. I'll do a quick commercial. I run a WhatsApp group. I've been running it for 18 months now. I do a daily update of markets I'm watching, trades I'm running, a Q&A, any questions throughout the day, markets you want looking at. I run regular webinars. You can have access to that recorded webinar. There's actually 3 different recorded webinars you can have access to as part of the group. I'll do the live webinar in the next couple of weeks. If you'd like to try it, the link is in the description to the video, to my website. Go to the website and use the code YouTube to sign up, and you can try it for a month. And if you don't like it after a month, you can go. But you can have access to those webinars and stuff like that. Okay, so that's a snapshot of what it looks like. The markets I talk about, chart of the day, all the usual stuff, and you have access to it's probably about 3 hours worth of webinars now, and the next live webinar as well. It's well worth it. And I run a trading course, 5-star Trustpilot reviews, a newsletter that's free of charge. If you go to the website, on the home page, there's a little box in there for you to sign up for the newsletter. I send that out every week. You can find out more at davidjonestrading.co.uk. And finally, to find out who I trade with, I've got bit.ly/DavidTrade. And like I say, all these links should be in the description. So, yeah, that's it. Right, let's have a look. Let's have a look at the stuff you'd like looking at Dogecoin, of course. Actually, before we look at Dogecoin, let's have a look at Tesla. Now, what happened yesterday? Something happened to do with EVs yesterday, didn't we? Hang on. Was it to do with US EV, what are they called? Credits, aren't they? Something to do with that yesterday. Kill Biden's electric vehicle tax credit. All right, what's the story? Donald Trump's transition team is planning to kill the 7,500 consumer tax credit for EVs as part of broader tax reform. Blah, 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 blah. Two sources told Reuters. All right, I did hear a bit of that. So there's the old Tesla, which is, again, has had a great run. See, we had earnings on Tesla back here. They were at 220, gapped higher on earnings. Another one that benefited massively from the Trump win, went from 250 to 360. Oh, what would you do? I mean, I would have shorted Tesla and I'd have been stopped out. Has it changed though? It has broken some big levels. Let's see what happens. But let's have a look at Dogecoin. Someone mentioned Dogecoin, which is, of course, the Department of Government Efficiency now, isn't it? It's not going to go wrong at all, is it? Let's have a look at Dogecoin. I mean, again, okay, if you're in it, it's great, but I can't sensibly trade something like that. You know, it goes from 15 to 44, so it nearly triples. How do you trade it? I mean, that again it's like some of these stocks we look at, isn't it? It's a lottery ticket, isn't it? You buy them at maybe 35 in the hope that maybe one day they're $3.50 or $35. I don't know, but it really is a bit of a spin the bottle one, the old Dogecoin, isn't it? But again, that has done. I think I do have some actually that I bought when I was down the pub about 5 years ago and explaining to a 10-year-old about how trading works, and bought some Doge at maybe 22, about 20 quid's worth. So I'll have to dig out that app and find it. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. All very exciting. Let's see what happens with that. Can we have a look at lumber? Up since mid-October. Let's have a look at lumber. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? It's been, because it did have a great run back here, whenever that was. So where's the data go back to? In 21, big run in, so because I remember it was was it? I just moved house, and they were building some houses, and they couldn't get. It was the whole supply chain stuff because of COVID, wasn't it? Nobody could get any wood, and maybe it was before that. Maybe it was before up here somewhere. I don't know. But the price of lumber went nuts, and it's all been a bit boring, or a bit big sideways range. Great trend, like you say. What would you do? Do you think it's going to break out? I think that's the trade now, isn't it? Do you think the price of lumber is going to carry on going up and up and up? I mean, for now, I would probably have to buy the dip, but I would be there's absolutely the case to thinking about going short with a stop above 600, because that's where it's topped out. You know, this has been a real problem area, hasn't it? You know, going back to August 22, so 2 years now, 600, 640 on lumber has been an issue, hasn't it? So, you know, for now, I'd still be a buyer. And if I was a buyer, where would my stop go? I would probably want it at least the other side of 560. But interesting to see what happens up here at the old highs is what I would say on lumber. Can we have a look at Qualcomm, QCOM, and Domino's Pizza? Qualcomm. It's a bit boring, isn't it? I mean, I'd buy it, absolutely buy it, but you know, we had a great trend, and then just sideways, isn't it? It's quite interesting that considering the bounce back we've had in stock markets since August, Qualcomm has done nothing. So some would think if markets did turn down, that could leave Qualcomm a bit vulnerable because it hasn't really participated on the way up, has it? So I don't know. If I did anything, I'd be a buyer. I'd put a stop loss below 150. It is all a little bit boring though, isn't it? At the moment, no real trend going on in Qualcomm. Domino's Pizza, they had done well, or they were doing well earlier this year, I think. Oh, again, that's all changed. Yeah. What would you do? Hang on, let's have a look. So we had a really good trend. That must have been earnings. I would probably still buy it. I'd probably wait till next week to buy it and see does it because it's been in this range, isn't it? It's been stuck in this range. It broke out of the range, which is normally bullish, but it's gone straight back into it again. So I would say, right, I'm going to wait and see, do I get a chance to buy it in the low 400s? Or if it breaks above 465, I'll buy it then. So it's a bit of a wait and see to me. So I'd be a buyer. It's just a question of when. But again, another one where we'd had great trend. I mean, that was a really good run from May. It was at $300 in May 23 to 540. It's a good move, isn't it? What's that? I can't do the maths. 80% move in just over a year, 15 months or so. So yeah, and it's just lost quite a lot of momentum since then, hasn't it? So let's see, Palo Alto. I had those down on my list, I think, for maybe this week. I think that might be interesting, Palo Alto. Yes. So Palo Alto Networks, I would be a buyer. So Kev says we have got earnings next week. I would buy it. I'd rather buy the dip as usual. It's been up for the last since Jan 23. So we're getting on for almost 2 years into that uptrend. So I'd be a buyer. As usual, the only question is where does my stop go? And I would probably want it somewhere below here. So if they did poorly on earnings, that would actually work for me. So I would buy it. But yeah, when are the earnings? So look. Wednesday, next Wednesday. Okay. So interesting one. But again, I would be a buyer of the dip on that. The only question is, where does my stop go? A more aggressive stop. You know, the old highs were at 380. So maybe the other side of, I don't know, 350 or something. But interesting to see what happens there. What next? Pool, Pool. Pool Corporation. Oh, it's boring again. Come on, you've got to come up with some good ones. Stop giving me the sideways stocks. It's a bit boring, isn't it? I mean, it's just stuck again. 420 to 300. It's a big range, but it's just stuck in the middle of the range, isn't it? So it's just not an exciting one. It's just there's no trend, is there? So you buy it, and it just flips about, isn't it? So it's all a bit boring, that one. Super Micro are getting delisted. Are they getting delisted? I mean, that is, and there's a great example of a profit is not a profit until you take it, isn't it? $120 a share, March 24, $18 today. And I think, I'm sure I saw somewhere they are getting delisted. I wouldn't touch them with a barge pole. Yeah, they are getting delisted. Could get delisted. Okay. Right, for me, trend is obviously down. It's been down for a while now. You know, there are some questions, one way or the other, about their finances, whether they prove to be true or not. Who knows? I've not been following the story. But for me, that is, yeah, that's not one for me. But again, it's a bit of a gamble. It's too much of a gamble for me if I was a buyer. Microsoft. I was in Microsoft earlier this year, so I'm going to say it's a buy. But let's have a look. It's a buy. It's a boring one again, though, isn't it? So a great trend. Well, this is quite interesting. Does this mean that markets are going to roll over if the likes of Microsoft aren't trending higher anymore? Let's have a look at Meta in a minute and Apple. Trend, and then just flat. So I'd still buy it, but I'd rather buy the dip. So yeah, let's have a quick look at Apple while it's in my head. Apple. That's sideways as well. Could be the top. It's interesting, yeah. Big trend is obviously up. Anyway, so thingy was a bit sideways. Microsoft is a bit sideways. Boeing has broken 140. Let's have a look at Boeing. Lots of issues, of course, last year with bits falling off their planes. I did wonder if it was going to be a buy, probably in here, thinking is all the bad news now factored into the price? And no, as you say, it keeps breaking support, doesn't it? You know, so for me, I would be a seller of the rally. I absolutely would have, if I was paying attention to that more earlier this year, I'd have been a buyer. And in the summer, I'd have been a buyer. But that is no, isn't it? The market still does not like it, does it? You know, it's just downtrend, 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 isn't it? So what's the next big level? What level did you say? 120? Yeah, it is, isn't it? The September 22 lows, isn't it? It doesn't mean it's going to get there, obviously, but that for me is a big level, the next big level on Boeing. But yeah, I'm surprised. Because obviously it didn't quite halve, but took a big hit, and I thought, I wonder if it makes a base and has another go. But no, that wasn't the case. So still weak. High tide, please, Connor. Okay, high tide. High Tide Inc. So it's a small stock. Never a fan of the small stocks, but you know it is on the up, isn't it? What do they do? Let's have a quick Google. Are we going to guess? Is it something really trendy like AI? What does High Tide do? Or do they make washing up detergent? What do you reckon? What does High Tide Company? It's telling me about waves. A writer-centered theatre company celebrating the joys and power of new plays based in the east of England. I don't think that's them, is it? Somehow, I don't think that's a theatre company. Is it this one? A Canadian cannabis company. The Rising Tide of Cannabis. Is that those? Yeah, it must be, mustn't it? Okay. Let's have a look. Again, I think, higher risk because it's a smaller stock, isn't it? It's gone from $1.60 to $3. I mean, I would be a buyer. I wouldn't sink my life savings into it. I'd be a buyer, and I put a stop, I don't know, the other side of 220, something like that. It's trying, isn't it? But look at here though. I mean, even here, in June it went from 270 down to 157. So what's that? That's $1 and a bit, isn't it? So it's a big old fall, isn't it? It's 40% drop. I mean, the thing moves around, doesn't it? So yeah, but it is trying to recover. It's just your tolerance for risk. How much are you willing to lose if it starts selling off again? Interesting to see where it is in 6 months' time. That one. Meta. Let's have a look at Meta. So the old Facebook. Another one that's solid. That's it. I'm calling the top. Right, let's mark the date. 15th of November. That's it. Stock markets have topped out for the next couple of years because everything is going sideways. I mean, it's had an incredible run, Meta, isn't it? That fell off a cliff from September 21, made the lows in November 22 at $90, and 2 years later, it's touched 600, isn't it? So I would be a buyer of the dip. Maybe we are going to get a bit of a dip from up here. So I'd be a buyer of the dip. Whenever it stops dipping, I'd be a buyer, and I would want to stop the other side of 500. So for me, the trend is up. It's just how far the sell-off goes. That 500 is a big level in Meta. So, yeah, let's see. Cocoa. I looked at Cocoa this week, and it was, again, I think it's gone a little bit boring, isn't it? Did it push lower, then recovered? But let's have a look. Oh, it has bounced right back. Okay. Because Cocoa had an amazing run, didn't it? From the first 4 months of this year, from about, whatever that is, 4,000 or 40, whatever it is, 4,000 up to 12,000. In April, and all a bit sideways. I would be thinking about selling short next week. That's what I would do. I'd take the view we're near the top of the range on Cocoa. Is it going to run out of steam again? So that's what I would be looking to do. In the short term, it's still strong. So if I had to do anything today, I'd probably buy it. But it is pushing right up against those old highs, isn't it? From 26th September. So, yeah, so short term strong, medium term, it's not done a lot since May of this year. Is it near the top of the range again? That would be my concern. There. What about UniCredit? UniCredit. What is it? What is UniCredit? Why is it not coming up? Coming up as bonds, a stock. Is it that one? The Milano? The Italian market, lovely. Is that the stock? It's a great stock, isn't it? Great trend, anyway, isn't it? If that's the right one. Unicredit, is it the right one? Unicredit? There's not another one? I don't know, but the trend is up, isn't it? So again, if I'd be a buyer of the dip. They're a bank. I'd be a buyer of the dip or a buyer now. And as usual, the only question is where would your stop go? And mine would go the other side of 35.5 euros, I think. JCI, there's lots of stocks today. Johnson Controls. Oh, these were a good performer, I think. Yes, earlier in the year. I would buy that as usual. It's it's a major break recently by that one, isn't it? We have these old highs from, when is it? December 21. So that's nearly a 3-year high. We have the election rally. So I think for me, that would be an interesting one for next week. So we've had a breakout. Is it a valid breakout? Nobody knows. So I would have a go at absolutely buying the dip on that one. And I would want my stop loss probably the other side of whatever these lows were, at the very least, before the break. So the lows before the break, the other side of 73. Interesting though, that one, the old JCI. I thought they had a good trend this year. So a quick look at this S&P. Oh, it's really tanked, isn't it? I've really missed the trick there. Well, I haven't missed the trick because it didn't rally. So never mind. But, okay. That's no trades for me today. Coterra Energy, C-O-T-E-R-R-A, Coterra Energy on the NYSE. Let's have a look at that. I would say a little bit boring again. What's the story behind Coterra? Let's have a look. Coterra Energy. Flexible and built for the future. Blah, blah, blah. Premier, diversified energy company. Generating cinemas. Flexible, blah, blah, blah. Okay, lots of that. Any recent news? Interesting. Expanded its Permian presence with 2 deals worth 3.95 billion. Went to buy assets and privately held. Line between Texas and New Mexico. Okay, there we go. Okay, so there's all that. I would say, for me, again, it's a little bit sideways, isn't it? The last, whatever it is, 2 years or so. If I was a buyer and thought, okay, there's long term, this thing's got potential, I would put my stop underneath at least $22. But from a charty point of view, it just looks a little bit choppy and not that directional at the moment. So let's see what happens there. But if that's it, then we're done. And you know what? I am probably finished for the day unless we get a massive rally in this S&P or this Nasdaq, so I can sell it. That could be it. What's gold? Let's have a quick flick through everything else. Gold. So like I said, I do think that the dollar will be interesting next week, the dollar index, and then gold and silver and the pound and the euro and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, see what happens with those. Stock markets, where does it stop? Nobody knows. So let's see where all that stops. What's the Nasdaq? So the Nasdaq's moved like 400 points so far today. So otherwise, we'll stop things there. So we'll do it all again next week. If you'd like to try out the WhatsApp group and get access to the recorded webinars and the live webinars of trading approaches, my trading approaches, particularly for short-term trading of US indices, which has been successful and profitable, join the WhatsApp group, use the code YouTube. If you're not subscribed to the website, if you want to subscribe, if you can click the like button, I always forget to ask for that. If you could click the like button to help with all that stuff. Otherwise, we'll do it all again. We'll do it all again next week, see what all these crazy markets are then. Any questions, you can always drop me an email, dj@davidjonestrading.co.uk. Otherwise, I'll leave it there. Good luck with your trading. Have a good weekend. And let's see where we are in a week's time.